Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I have with me two amazing guests. We have Leah Linder and we have Pam Conboy, and they have a background that is very interesting. So let me just introduce you quickly. Pam has a background in biology, and she was trained as a clinical laboratorian and is currently a doctoral student in naturopathic medicine. She is an IIN certified health coach. Me too. Trained psychedelic facilitator, medical, marketing, and business development entrepreneur, and ordained minister. And Leah has a background in biochemistry and emergency medicine, and she's a naturopathic physician trained in psychedelic assisted therapy with deep expertise in natural supplement formulation and manufacture. She's a master gardener, experienced educator, and ordained minister. So welcome both Leah and Pam.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, so let's get started with our conversation today about what got you both into this path and this journey with psychedelic and spiritual health.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had first started utilizing psychedelics with some patients. And like you said, my background is as a naturopathic physician. And so we had all of the foundational diet, lifestyle, holistic practices on board. But I had in 1 week, 3 patients that came up to me and they're like, oh, I listened to this podcast, or I watched this documentary, or I read this book, and I really want to try microdosing. And, at that point, I was kind of more ignorant to the science behind, utilizing psilocybin as medicine. And so I was like, okay, let me dive into the research and get back to you. And the research was there. There's heaps of, studies on the benefits for depression and anxiety and PTSD and other mental health conditions, but even more recently on sleep and diabetes and fibromyalgia and chronic pain. I mean, there's just so much out there. And I was having lunch with Pam, and I was like, I had these patients that are, microdosing, and like incredible catalysts to their overall well-being, change, healthier relationships with alcohol, with their partners, having more productivity at work, feeling more aligned with their own spiritual path. And I was, like I said, having lunch with Pam, and I was like, we got to get this in the water. It feels like everybody could benefit from this. And Pam's light bulbs went off. So I'll let her finish that part of the story.
So just maybe what a bit of information that's useful to the conversation is Leah and I work together at a professional nutritional supplement company together. So I was more on the marketing side. Leah started at tech support and then formulation. So we had a lot of the background about how nutritional supplements should be both developed, tested, packaged, the whole 9 yards. So that was nice having in the back pocket. So listening to Leah's stories, I'm thinking, wow, that's amazing. I didn't even realize there was this big renaissance of psychedelic medicine. I mean, in 2018 and 19, FDA itself sort of called psilocybin a breakthrough therapy for depression and trauma, and it really opened the doors to more and more research. Last 15 years has been super busy. Most of the prestigious academic institutions in the U.S. have a psychedelic lab. So it's out there. Wow. And there's a lot out there. So I was aware that there were ayahuasca churches. And I'm thinking, okay, they're operating with entheogens, clearly class 1 substances, but they're doing it so safely. They're above board. So it turns out that in 1993, the federal government passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, specifically for indigenous peoples that were working with entheogens and sincere spiritual practice. So that's the key, sincere spiritual practice. So the legislation is federal. It does not specify any specific practice, just that it is a sincere spiritual one, nor does it specify what entheogen. It just kind of opens the door to protect the peoples that have been using these medicines for hundreds and thousands of years. So that's how you do it. There's actually a board of attorneys that specialize in psychedelic medicine. So I set off to build a church. We are at 501(c) federally recognized spiritual organization. We behave like a church. We take this very seriously because that's our protection. So we do, 3 complimentary or free courses, if you will, each month. One's more didactic, science and sermon, and that's a virtual class. We have a more experiential class, what we call Setas Sensation, and that is live here in Reno. And then we have a few virtual integration circles actually per month. One is for, and we can talk about this later, it's super interesting. One is more for cognitive decline, and the other is a more generalized live integration circle. So we really do take it seriously. We don't engage in commerce, but we do have a few entheogenic offerings. So we have microdosing. And that is all based on Leah's formulations, what she had been doing with her patients, and applied them to actual products. And we can go into that, but that's a picture of the microdosing. We have 3 different flavors, so to speak, and then we do macrodose ceremonies. Primarily here in Reno right now, but we're starting to take this on the road because of the federal protection that we operate under. And that's a new experience for us. We've only been around for a year now, but the demand is there. It makes a startlingly impressive difference in people's lives, and it's really durable. Mm-hmm. So we could go down like 7 alleys right from there. I'll let you lead us.
Yeah, Pam, it's so clear that you have a background in marketing, because the way you laid everything out and all the pieces and showed us the product and all the different parts there was very nice and organized. So yeah, I have a lot of questions coming into this conversation. Well, let's start with, you mentioned, and also Leah mentioned, that there's a demand, right? And why is that, right? A lot of people who listen to my show are in healthcare or some kind of health practitioners, and they're looking for integrating a more holistic approach. So how does this fit into a picture of holistic health?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's a very safe option.
Yeah, it's a safe option. It has a really strong safety profile. So, there's so many mind-altering substances out there, including nicotine and alcohol, other, entheogenic plants like LSD, MDMA, but psilocybin has the strongest safety profile. And so there is very low interaction with other medications, other nutraceuticals. So from that perspective, it's a really great option for people that are wanting to, support their patients in participating in this. And the other thing is that it has a lot of durable changes from a neurochemical perspective in the brain. So psilocybin is converted into psilocin in the body, which acts as an agonist to the 5-HT2A serotonin receptors. And those are primarily located in the prefrontal cortex. And this activation leads to altered perception, mood, cognition, and can contribute to that deep introspective experience, even at a microdose. Secondly, it has an incredible ability to increase synaptic plasticity. So when psilocybin promotes that growth of dendritic spines and increases the formation of new synaptic connections, it really leads to these long-term meaningful changes. It helps people rewire their brains so that they don't have to feel stuck. Because, when I speak with larger groups too, I, have everybody raise their hand if they've never experienced trauma before. And nobody ever can, right? Being human can be a very challenging goal to accomplish. So, encouraging that new wiring, that new formation can be really valuable. And then it also, alters what's called the default mode network. And the default mode network is the regions in the brain that are associated with self-referential thinking, or our ego. And psilocybin reduces the default mode network. So there's a sense of ego disillusionment. And there's more of an interconnectedness with the greater collective, and a loss of boundaries between the self and the external world. So really helping people feel like they are part of the greater collective. It also releases dopamine and oxytocin, so helping with that emotional processing, helping with addiction, and then also influences alpha brain waves. And this is especially in the prefrontal cortex, but it's linked to the breakdown of normal cognitive boundaries, allowing for like novel perception, novel connectedness, new ideas, new productivity. So it really is the flavor in the background. So yes, we have to have, we can't out supplement a bad diet and lack of exercise and lack of connection, but also, every ailment in the body has an emotional aspect to it. And so utilizing psilocybin can be an incredible catalyst for supporting people with that mental emotional connection to what else is going on in their body.
So, and one of the other things, Marina, is, as you probably very well know, the use of SSRIs and other sort of psychiatric medicines is just off the charts. We're in a deep dive as far as a country, maybe worldwide. And these folks are getting parked on these medications for decades. It's kind of criminal, and a lot of them are looking to get off of that crutch, or it just stopped working altogether. We also have a lot of cognitive decline. We had the great pleasure of being introduced to a neurologist here in our area early on when we're investigating how to get this done. And he worked at Johns Hopkins, so was very familiar with psychedelic medicines. And he deals with a lot of early Alzheimer's, cognitive decline, etc. And some of the medications that are available are just not, the people aren't qualified to take it, or they don't want to take the risk. And psilocybin is a really, really safe and interesting choice for these patients. And I would say at this point, we have probably 30 of his patients that are using our microdosing to really, really strong outcomes as far as mood elevation, reducing the tension in the house. The spouses and caregivers love the shift that his patients are getting just from the support of psilocybin. So there are a lot of ills in our society, I think, that are not being addressed very well. And there's more and more and more research that it's just all over the place. Every medical conference that I've been to in the last 2 years has a psychedelic track. And we're going to be speaking at the Integrative Medicine for Mental Health Conference this September. There's a lot of interest amongst folk, just regular people, as well as healthcare practitioners and therapists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even next month in May, so I don't know when this is going to air, but in May, I'm also speaking at the Institute for Functional Medicine annual conference as well on a panel about psychedelics. And so, there's practitioners that are starting to come up to speed with how this can be a valuable aspect to supporting their patients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a pharmacist, I am acutely aware of how many SSRIs, SNRIs, and all kinds of antidepressants are prescribed on a daily basis to people, and how it's not really getting to the root causes of their mental well-being at all. And it's just getting them to alter the brain chemicals that they are producing and to have higher levels of certain ones of them. But then you get down regulation and you have to keep increasing the dose, and then there's tolerance, and then there's side effects that's doing inside your body. And eventually, if you do want to discontinue that, it's going to be a long process because there's going to be some withdrawal effects there. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we definitely need more solutions for people's mental health and why, right? Getting to that question of why are people suffering with mental health? I don't think it's just a matter of diagnosis and how we're getting better at diagnosing. And I also don't think it's our fault that, we have an imbalance of brain chemicals going on and that there's something wrong with us and we need to just upregulate certain ones. I don't think that's the answer. I think there's a reason why everybody collectively is feeling so much heaviness and not feeling like everything is really as it should be in our environment. And I think this is something that you're speaking to, right? If you mentioned earlier, Leah, that everybody should really have this in their water supply, right? I've heard doctors say, oh, let's put statins in everybody's water supply. I think, no, please don't do that. Let's fix what is making us sick in the environment in the first place. And then this psilocybin can be actually part of the solution. And I know there's some history around when historically we started using this medicine and how it may have contributed to our development into our thinking species and into our thinking brains of the Homo sapiens sapiens, right? So I'd love for you to speak, Pam, like clinically, right? What got you to, Leah, actually, what got you to think, okay, you know what, I need to really start experimenting and adding something else to my patients because they really need this key missing element?
I have to give reverence to my patients. They were the ones that kind of ignited this aspect of, wanting to do it. So I've seen the stoned ape theory, and I have a deep reverence for mushrooms and mycelia because they are the largest organism on the planet. And that coevolution, I think, is so valuable to witness, is that, we have evolved with these beautiful fungi, and they have helped with our growth and development, and they have so much wisdom to them, right? They're the ones that connect with the trees and the birds and the songs and everything to, create this greater network that looks very much like our neural networks. And so with reverence to my patients of kind of activating that, it was so beautiful. And the more that I had more patients engaging with it, the more that I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Because like you were saying, people get parked on medicines, pharmaceutical medicines for decades. And it's, like you said, not addressing the root cause. And the reason why I think that this is real medicine is that the more you use it, the less you need to achieve the same benefits, right? And sometimes it's one and done, right? People can suffer with depression, maybe their whole life, lots of trauma. And we have lots of really great cases that I'm sure we can talk about, their whole life, and go through one experience and come out of it a totally different being. Right? They can really finally put down that trauma, put down that baggage. It doesn't mean that it goes away. You just get a different ability to look at it, like a different viewpoint to look at it. And it's awe-inspiring. Truly, it's the most profound work that I've ever done in my life. And I've spent a lot of time in medicine. And again, I love natural medicine. I love root cause medicine. And this was one thing that wasn't being addressed by natural health or by, conventional medicine traditionally, is that mental health is something that, again, some people, talk therapy works really well. EMDR works really well. Sometimes pharmaceuticals are needed to kind of, wrench people out of the ditch. But really getting at that root cause and supporting people's wellness for the long term is the most rewarding part of it.
Thank you. And how would you tell somebody who might be a clinician or a health practitioner that would be interested in researching this or even trying this for their patients, perhaps, like where does one get started and how does one do it safely?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we worked in the nutritional supplement space. So we know where to source organic materials, we know where to do third-party testing. We actually, the microdosing is in capsules, and we have that done at, this was the universe giving us the go-ahead, at an FDA certified facility, a small contract manufacturer, which is an astonishing miracle. So it's the highest quality that you're going to get. We know what quality looks like in this space. So the safety is there. The way this sort of operates is that anyone that's interested in working with psilocybin with us needs to be a member of the Church of Setas Seminary. This costs nothing. It's just part of the protection mechanism. So we can all say that we're doing this in sincere spiritual practice. That's what we go back to, the RFRA legislation. So when we were first starting this whole enterprise, there's always a question of how how do you market it? How do you do the outreach? You want to be responsible, but also get the information to the people that could really benefit, and try to avoid the people that are looking to buy a bag of drugs, because that's not what we do. So we've been really working grassroots, started local and are kind of spreading out. As I mentioned, I've been to a handful of medical conferences in the last 2 years, and there's a deep interest. And once we get into the conversation, even if I'm there for a different reason, I have mushrooms on the back of my phone. So people say, oh, that's cool. Oh, let me tell you the story about the mushrooms. So actually this year, because we've had so much interest, we are planning to, if there's enough demand, to offer ceremonies ahead of and to follow some key integrative conferences. We're not associated with the conferences. It's just, out of convenience. If the practitioner is going to be there in that area, we're going to have this available. It's just a matter of how we reach out to the attending practitioners, because the conferences themselves are not going to really promote a class, a Schedule I substance. So, but we are going to be doing that in San Diego, both ahead of and to follow IFM, the functional medicine in San Diego again in September, ahead of and to follow IMMH, that's the Integrative Medicine for Mental Health Conference, and then the Naturopathic Physicians Association in Palm Springs, and that's in July. So yeah, first step, if you're interested, is to take a look at our website. On the front end of our website, we don't speak to psilocybin specifically. Again, that's kind of walking the line where we don't want to attract the wrong attention, but you just become a member completely free. It'll take a minute. Then you get credentials to get to the back end of the website, where there's a lot of research. There are videos, recommended reading, information about our pairings, and then you can reach out. Happy to have a conversation, one or both of us at any time. Yeah, patient membership, we get a lot of referrals from practitioners once they have some comfort in what we're doing and the quality and the process that we take for both micro and macro dose ceremonies. So we are growing steadily, but cautiously, because we just want to make sure the information gets out properly.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to add on to that, there is a very strong renaissance of psychedelic medicine. And so MAPS, or the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies, they have a wonderful training program for facilitators, but also a library of other clinical studies, protocols, integration resources. Fluence is another one that I got trained with. And so they offer continuing education for practitioners specifically, and also certification programs for mental health professionals in psychedelic integration and therapy. CIIS are the California Institute for Integral Studies. They also have a really great program and certificate for psychedelic assisted therapies and other research. And that's more designed for licensed professionals. So therapists, doctors, clergy, those types. There's lots of them out there, but I think that those, from a vetting perspective, can be the most valuable and the most commonly recognized.
And just for a general resource, honestly, if people want to dig into where the science is right now, spiritpharmacist.com. He's fantastic. He's focused his whole career at this point on the therapeutic value of psychedelic medicines. Yeah. So not just psilocybin, but that's a very rich website of information.
Mm-hmm. He's wonderful. Ben Malcolm is his name.
Yeah, I've heard about him from several sources since he's a fellow pharmacist. I have to have him on sometime too. So this gives me a chance to reach out to him.
Yeah, he's amazing and a great, just great depth of information. And he's just the kindest soul. So would recommend.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all those resources. And this actually reminds me of how Pam and I met at the Integrative Healthcare Symposium back in February of this year. And was it February? Maybe it was January, but right. I saw the mushroom case And, you know, I asked about it, and then that's how we connected. And I checked out your beautiful website, and I invited you to come on this podcast. So for people listening out there, and we've mentioned several different times of ways to work with the mushrooms and with the psilocybin, could you talk a little bit about how they all differ with the microdosing or the journeys or the clinical settings? Like what's each indicated for, and a little bit about how each looks like?
Yeah, so microdosing is a whisper in the background, and it's a really great introduction for a lot of people, especially if they have some apprehension around participating in psilocybin, because you're not going to get any hallucinogenic effects. These are subperceptual doses, so this can be an opportunity to gain some trust in the medicine, but also, unlike the fuller doses of a psychedelic experience, meaning a macro dose, microdosing aims for those subtle changes and subtle alterations in perception and consciousness. Now, that can be really great for a lot of people, especially even healthcare providers, or the busy moms or the, busy executives and whatnot, just to utilize it as a calming force, more creativity, more alignment with, who they are as an individual. And then also in macrodosing, these are much stronger doses. So microdosing is generally between 0.1 and 0.5 milligrams. Macrodosing is more...
That's whole mushrooms, just to be clear, because sometimes you'll see research that are the small molecule.
Yeah, so whole mushrooms. Thank you, Pam. And then macrodosing is generally between 3 and 7 grams in there. And these are much more associated for people that need a stronger shakeup, right? The people that have been stuck for a really long time really want to shift their perception. It's kind of like that big catalyst where you kind of get a little rocket to your new self. So those are kind of the differentiations between the microdose and then the macrodose. And then as far as, go ahead. And then as far as a clinical setting, there's different ways to participate in this. We what we like to call more free range journeying. And then there's also the clinical setting with the eye mask and the, earphones on board. Now, that is much more associated with clinical research. And like Pam was saying, those are small molecules and not whole mushrooms. And the reason why they do that is because then there's a clinical, from building a research study, you have to know exactly what you're taking, you have to know what dose, you have to have the profile of the person in front of you. But we utilize whole mushrooms because there's so many other wonderful benefits that come with whole mushrooms. There's the beta glucans, the other terpenes that are in there that can really help support the gut-brain axis, the gut-liver axis, and support people in that regard. So there's a reason why people do the clinical research setting, but we find so much more benefit with the whole mushroom.
And, the folks come to us in a few different pathways. A lot of people are definitely interested in what this natural mushroom can do and what's all this talk about, etc. So you have folks that are very trepidatious and might start with microdosing. So they want to get familiar with how they feel with the mushrooms inside them, get some comfort with the use of them, and then might move on to a more macrodose experience. There are others that have been stuck, especially folks that have dealt with trauma, as Leah was mentioning, that really, really could benefit from a much bigger shakeup. And then they'll use microdosing as part of their ongoing integration practice. So although we try to help guide people based on what they are describing, it's really up to them. And the mushrooms. And this is the same thing when people will say, okay, if I do this macro dose, how often do I have to do it? Well, I don't know. You'll tell me. You may never have to do it again. Some people do it on a quarterly kind of clean out, right? Folks that have a lot of entrenched trauma, there's a lot of layers to kind of work through. So, you'll have a big blowout, kind of integrate all of that change, and maybe 6 months later, you're up for it again. It really varies on the individuals, their comfort level, their trepidation, really. So you have to, most people that come without any experience come very frightened of the whole process. Am I going to fall for macrodose? Am I going to fall apart in a million different pieces? Well, in our experience, not only do you not fall apart, you come together for the first time in decades sometimes. So, when you're ready, we can share a few snippets, because just sharing the cases that we've had come through our doors in the last year brings tears to our eyes collectively. It's really awe-inspiring.
Well, and I think another important thing to mention here is that strain matters. So each of the different mushrooms has a different personality to them. And a lot of the mushrooms, people have their little baggies that they got from who knows where. The ones that are most common, because they're they're the most easy to grow, are more the hard hitters. So they are harder on the psyche, harder on that emotional process, can really give people a more tough journey. And then there's also mushrooms that have a lot of lightness to them, have a lot of happy heart to them, help connect third eye, with the greater consciousness, but in a really gentle way. And so I think that that's something also, like, I've done a lot of market research, if you will, but also it's important to know what strains that you are getting, because some of them can be a little bit more of like Hulk smashers to people when they're going on a macro journey.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And I think this is a perfect segue into talking about expectations, right? So say somebody comes in and they're looking to maybe learn more. They've heard about psychedelic mushrooms or entheogens, which we haven't defined, but we've been using the term entheogen to say that this is a substance that helps us connect with spirit, connects with God, the universe, to a higher source of some sort. And they're interested, they heard about it, they know that you are going to guide them in a safe way. So where do you start with deciding where they should start? And then also, if they choose to go for the macro, what will they expect to experience?
Mm-hmm.
So are you asking kind of the process of when people
Exactly.
Well, I can kind of give you an overview of that. People come to us in a variety of different ways, sometimes through their healthcare provider. We do some local education here and a lot of word of mouth, a lot. That's where most of our sort of new members come from. Typically, the process is they'll take a look at the website. They might reach out and say, wow, what's this? So we'll have a conversation. I'll typically have a conversation with them and encourage them to become a member so they can get to the back end of the website where it's very rich in additional information. For most of our folks, they will become a member. They'll read, they'll talk to people, maybe discuss how others have approached it, either micro or macro or both. And I would say probably from the time I hear from them first, they'll take some kind of action, interest in psilocybin within 6 to 8 weeks. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's longer, but that's probably the average. And once they have expressed interest in psilocybin, we do our due diligence. We want to make sure that people are medically qualified. So, as you know, SSRIs and other medications can sort of tamper the effect of psilocybin. Things like lithium they don't play so well with psilocybin, so we would refer back to the psychiatrist. As a church, we do not provide medical services. We have the great blessing that Leah is a trained naturopathic physician, and she will do a thorough medical intake if they're interested in macro, as Dr. Leah. But, to keep ourselves safe, we keep that very separate. So they'll get the medical intake, they'll get a beautiful hardcover author-signed integration journal to help them start thinking about setting, intention, and why all of that's important. If they're in a small group, we're talking macro now, they get to meet the group members. So we take a maximum of 6 people at a time. The dosage for a small group is 2 to 3 grams of whole mushrooms. So that is definitely a psychedelic journey. But if you want to go much deeper, like the 5 to 7 gram land, we'll take that solo, 1 person at a time, occasionally 2. Because you just don't know what's going to come up with a much bigger and more intense journey. And then it's a full day ceremony. We provide transportation. Leah does beautiful ceremony, a little bit of movement, a little meditation. The sacrament, because we're a church, the psilocybin is taken in a tea, so it's really very palatable. Church is here at my home. I have 13 acres of land, and it's getting more and more to look like a formal retreat. We start in teepee. We have a lot of comfortable, beautiful places for people to go. Everybody communes with the mushrooms in a different way. So if you want to stay in the teepee with an eye mask and meditative music, you're welcome to. If you want to wander around the property, we encourage it. If you want to sit in the swing under the cedar tree, I have the cedar tree. Arthur, the cedar tree, everyone's drawn to Arthur. If you want to sit in a hot tub, whatever you want to do, our job is to make sure you're safe, well cared for, you're not getting too much sun, you have water on board. If you want to talk, we're there for you to talk to. If you want to be left completely alone, we just want to make sure we know where you are and you're at peace. So we allow people to interact as they wish. So the journey itself lasts 3 to 4 hours typically. It comes down kind of in waves. And then we'll have a family meal to follow, do some integration work. Leah will drop all the babies off to follow, who end up being different persons than the ones that came in the morning. The energy shifts radically. A lot of times it'll be like a hot tub party at the end that everyone has left their baggage someplace else. It's beautiful, and it's really, really very durable. And then we do integration specific to that group, as well as ongoing integration every month and as needed. So community and support are really part of this whole process. The microdosing is a little bit less extreme, as we were talking about. It sort of whispers, and we do a medical intake, a screening for that as well. But at low level, unless they have interfering substances on board, we don't take as much proactive. We're doing a formal medical screening. We're going to go through your history, what you're after, if you have any cardiac issues, or all of that is covered if you do macrodose. So that's kind of the process. And generally speaking, they'll start really participating with the community, assuming they're local. So they come to the events. They make really close friends with other people that are traveling this same pathway. Once you have a common bond, like doing psychedelic medicines at a church in the high desert, that's a really big thing, right? You immediately understand each other. So the community has been a really beautiful, supportive aspect of this whole endeavor.
Yeah, beautiful. And you mentioned a good safety profile for psilocybin. So I'm wondering, are there any side effects during the journey or after the journey that you have noticed in your experience?
Side effects, that's an interesting question. So I guess I'll start off with, there are some hard no's for people as far as participating in this medicine. Untreated bipolar disorder is a big one. People that are on lithium medications, and then people that are on like super strong multiple SSRIs, SNRIs, different psychotropic medicine. So from that perspective, it's not to say that people that are on SSRIs don't have the ability to participate in this medicine, because it does have such a strong safety profile, but we work with them and their prescribing physician to basically, if they need to, taper down a little bit before their journey, because again, psilocybin is going to compete specifically with SSRIs for the same receptors. So they get more of a blunting effect. And if they are on a high dose of SSRIs and taking psilocybin, there is the potential for what's called serotonin syndrome. And that is a medical emergency. So we want to make sure that we can help taper people down before they go through a big journey, and not completely have to be off of them, but at least taper them down before that experience. We also want to know whether or not they have any heart disease or any arrhythmias. Psilocybin can increase heart rate. And so for people that have arrhythmias or high blood pressure, it's something to just like have in the background information, knowing that those things are controlled in that way and not uncontrolled. The other thing is seizure disorders or epilepsy. So those are things that we also screen for, because a lot of anti-seizure medication or anti-epileptic medication can interfere with psilocybin. We want to know if they have diabetes, because blood sugar decreases. We encourage people to be fasting and in a fasted state before they take the medicine or take the sacrament, because it helps the activation of it happen faster. So if they have diabetes, we want to make sure that they have their, blood sugar controlled. And for those, we can adjust the whole fasting aspect. Liver, kidney disease. So psilocybin is converted into psilocin in the liver. So liver disease is specifically non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, any cirrhosis, any infective agent on board is something to pay attention to. Kidney disease, it's a water-soluble nutrient, and so want to make sure that they're able to excrete it. Anyways, there's like a whole list that we can continue to rally through this, but also knowing what their psychiatric history is. So if we think about potential side effects, again, strain matters. And so a lot of people on certain strains will have a harder time emotionally and have that, more of an emotional break, have a harder time going through it. But certain strains can also make for a really pleasant experience. So even if they're having, quote unquote, a difficult time, it is a happy, difficult time. We have lots of people that will sit and cry, but have the biggest smiles on their faces. So, I guess to answer your question, from a medical perspective, side effects can be increased heart rate, increased blood pressure, decrease blood glucose levels. There can be that emotional release, right? So that, I guess, potentially could be a side effect, but it's kind of like what you're going there for. And body temperature decreases as well.
So the one other thing that's a small side effect that's easily addressed is nausea. The chitin in the mushrooms can make folks nauseous. It's really common with women, especially older women like myself. So we will typically offer a little bit of protein, some nuts, a little cheese or something like that to have on board, which most of the time will knock that out. But we also offer Zofran, so an antiemetic, because we want people on macro journey to not feel uncomfortable. So we have that available as a prophylactic agent. And the nausea will go away, but it's no fun to be nauseous.
No.
So we try to make sure that that does not happen.
Yeah, thank you for the safety precautions. I think that's one of the things that is really, really important for people to know going in, what to expect and how to prepare themselves and how to know if this is for them. Because you always want to do risk versus benefit in medicine and in anything that we endeavor. So I think that is really important. And thank you so much for sharing how you handle it. Now, there's also a lot of talk about trauma, right? And everybody, like you said, nobody comes into this life or comes out of this life without some level of trauma, and our perception of what that is can vary from person to person. But what does the psychedelic medicine space offer for trauma, right? Can it re-traumatize a person? Is that a possibility? Or how does it connect people to their trauma or out of their trauma?
Oh man, this is such a good question. I know Pam and I are both like, who wants to answer that?
Because as Leah says, you got a lot of things going on in your brain, right? So folks that have trauma, they've built this big level of armor, and it's just, pardon my language, but I say like, ooh, you're in the shit river, right? All of this garbage up to your eyeballs. It owns you. You're stuck. And, you know, from just thinking about what the mushrooms do, not the mechanisms, but the mushrooms take you out of the river and put you on the bank, right? So you can shake it all off and it's still there. The things have happened, but it just doesn't own you anymore. And the release you see with people that go through that experience is just mind-boggling. The whole shift in energy. We had, this one of my favorite little stories. I won't go into it in great detail, but this poor woman in her 50s, sexual abuse all through her childhood by a family member. Nobody admitted it. Into adulthood, had broken, relationships all over the place, was wearing a mask most of her life, had a really unhealthy relationship with alcohol. She was terrified. She was one of those that sat for 4 hours, tears streaming down her face, big smile on, and sort of as she's coming out of her journey, looks at us and says, who am I now without this burden? Welcome home. Welcome home. She, in 2 months, addressed her abuser and everyone else that had covered it up, brought her 2 kids back to her house, and they'd been living with the dad, got a job after 2 years of unemployment. This is all within 2 months. These shifts are really, really durable, and integration is part of it. So it's really important in what we offer to try to help support people with the tools that work for them to keep on that track. Because, the brain it's a habituated organism. So if you let it go back to the shit river, it's going to go back there. So we want to keep you on the bank, and it's not that hard to do. It's really, really amazing, the shift that people will get, especially the folks with trauma. The deep traumas, though, often will need a couple of visits.
Well, and so that's the other thing, just to mention that, is that if you do need to get back in the river and need to, go a little bit further downstream and continue to unpack those layers, this medicine can, give you the tools to make a boat so that you're not getting back in the river, back up to your eyeballs. You actually have a vessel now where you can continue to go down river and view this beautiful, river, if you will, but not be in it. And then find another bank, right? Find another eddy, find another pull-out space on your next journey so that you can look at it from a different perspective, look at it from a little bit further on down through the journey of what those layers are.
Wow. Well, Pam and Leah, those are absolutely brilliant analogies, and I've absolutely loved this conversation. And if you have just one more minute, I'd love to do a rapid fire round with you.
Please, fire away.
All right. So question number 1, I always ask this of everybody. What's the number 1 thing that you would recommend somebody do to improve their quality of life right now?
Sleep.
Yeah. I would say take a deep breath. Or 5 deep breaths.
Great option.
Movement.
Great option. Okay. Question number 2. What's something that you wish more people knew about psychedelic medicine?
That it's not scary.
That it's not outside of yourself. It helps you reconnect with who you really are.
Beautiful. Now, question 3 is a fun one. What's a fun hobby that each of you have, or maybe something surprising that most people don't know about you?
Ooh, I'm a vermiculturist, so I raise worms.
That's different.
So fun.
I tend to be a workaholic, but I would say if a fun hobby, I don't do too much of anymore, but jumping out of airplanes.
Ooh, all right. You guys probably take the top of anybody I've ever asked that question to. All right, beautiful. So I'd love for you to tell our audience how to get in touch with you, any special offers that you have going on, and how to connect further.
Website is the first and best option. So it's setasseminary.org. That's SETAS seminary.org. That, as I mentioned, if you want to kind of do a deep dive into the research and the resources and the whatnot, just become a member. That's absolutely free. We're going to share with you a little ebook that I put together that gives some background on research, clinical studies, some of our outcomes, and how to connect with us. If you're, local to Reno, you'll see us around. We make the rounds quite often. But even if you're not, we do have virtual events, and we're always available to have discussions and answer any questions at all.
Absolutely. You can also follow us on social media. So it's at setas.seminary. So come find us on social media.
All right, perfect. I'll have all those links in the show notes for everybody. And thanks so much again for this wonderful conversation, Pam and Leah. And I hope to see you again soon. Bye.
Marina.
Thanks so much.